The air was crisp on that October morning. It had a real bite to it. Frost covered the ground like a thin blanket of sugar. I was with my two best mates, Liam and Cole. We are all experienced outdoorsmen. We know how to handle ourselves in the wild. Our plan was simple. We were heading to the old Hargrave property. It was a place surrounded by stories and whispers. We wanted to see it for ourselves. The property was deep in the woods, far from any main road. No one had lived there for years, or so we thought. The journey was not going to be an easy one, but we were ready for the challenge. Our trek began at the base of a steep wooded hill. The path was barely there. It was more like a deer trail than a human track. We had to push through thick bushes and climb over fallen logs. The leaves under our boots made a loud crunching sound. It was the only noise we could hear besides our own breathing. The climb was tough. Our legs burned with the effort. We moved slowly and carefully, always watching our footing. The trees were tall and dense. They blocked out most of the morning sun. It felt like walking through a long, dark tunnel. We knew this hike would take at least 2 hours. Liam was in the lead, using a sturdy stick to clear away spider webs. I was in the middle, and Cole was right behind me. We communicated with hand signals and quiet words. There was no need for loud talk out here. The wilderness demands respect. You have to be aware of your surroundings at all times. We saw signs of wildlife everywhere. There were deer tracks in the soft mud and claw marks on the bark of a tree. A hawk circled high above us, its cry echoing through the silent woods. This was its world, and we were just visitors passing through. The isolation was incredible. It felt like we were the only people for miles around. After what felt like an eternity, the steep incline started to level out. The trees began to thin. We could see patches of blue sky now. We knew we were getting close. According to our map, the Hargrave house was just over the next ridge. The air grew colder as we gained elevation. We stopped for a moment to catch our breath and have a drink of water. We looked at each other, a silent agreement passing between us. We were all feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. We were about to step into a local legend. The final part of our journey was just ahead. We tightened our backpacks and pushed forward into the unknown. We finally crested the ridge and saw it. The Hargrave property. It was spread out in a small clearing below us. The first thing we noticed was the fence. It was an old wrought iron fence that circled the entire property. It was tall and looked formidable. But something was immediately wrong. The main gate, a heavy double gate, was standing wide open. Not just unlocked, but swung all the way open as if someone had just driven through. This was the first detail that didn't sit right with us. An abandoned property should be locked up tight. An open gate is an invitation, but it also feels like a warning. As we got closer, a strange smell hit us. It was faint at first, carried on the cold breeze. It was not the usual scent of the forest, which is all damp earth and pine needles. This was something else. It was slightly sweet, but also faintly metallic. It was a smell I couldn't quite place, and that made me uneasy. Liam sniffed the air and looked over at me, his brow furrowed. He didn't like it either. Cole, who has a very keen sense of smell, described it as off. It was a tiny clue, just a scent in the air, but it added to the growing feeling that things were not as they should be at Hargrave House. The silence was the next thing that struck us. It was a deep, unnatural quiet. In the woods you usually hear something, a bird chirping, a squirrel chattering, the wind rustling through the leaves. But here there was nothing. It was like all the normal sounds of nature had been switched off. The air was completely still. It felt heavy, almost suffocating. We stopped walking and just listened. The silence was so complete that I could hear the blood pounding in my own ears. It was the kind of quiet that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. We stood there at the edge of the woods for a long time, just observing. The open gate, the strange smell, the unnerving silence. Each detail on its own was small, but when you put them all together, they painted a disturbing picture. It felt like we had walked into a scene that was paused in the middle of the action. Something had happened here, and the evidence was all around us. Our adventure was quickly turning into an investigation. We were no longer just curious explorers. We were now witnesses to something we didn't understand, and the mystery was pulling us in. We decided to move forward, but our approach was completely different now. We were no longer just hiking. We were moving like predators, or maybe prey. We stayed low and used the trees for cover. We moved from one shadow to the next, making as little noise as possible. Every snap of a twig under our boots sounded like a gunshot in the dead quiet. Liam took the lead again, his eyes scanning every window of the house. Cole and I followed close behind, watching the surrounding woods. We were on high alert, our senses were cranked up to the maximum. We were ready for anything. The house itself looked surprisingly normal. It was a 2-story wooden building painted a dark green that blended in with the forest. It was old for sure, but it looked well maintained. There were no broken windows or holes in the roof. A neat stack of firewood was piled up against one wall. A garden hose was coiled perfectly next to a spigot. It looked like someone could walk out the front door at any second. This normality was almost more frightening than if the house had been a ruin. A ruin is what you expect. A perfectly normal-looking house in the middle of this strange silence is deeply unsettling. We circled the property, keeping our distance. We wanted to get a full picture before we got any closer. We checked the backyard. There was a small shed, its door firmly shut and padlocked. A vegetable garden sat nearby, the plants withered from the recent frost. An empty bird feeder hung from the branch of a large oak tree. Everything was neat, everything was in its place. It was the home of someone who cared about their property. This wasn't the lair of a recluse who had let things go. This was a home, and it was completely, utterly empty. The silence was louder here, in this tidy, abandoned space. The feeling that something was wrong grew stronger with every step we took. It was a gut feeling, an instinct that all three of us shared. We have spent enough time in the wild to trust our instincts. When an animal's territory feels wrong, you know it. This place felt wrong. It felt like walking into a very carefully set trap. But there was no sign of danger. There were no tracks, no voices, no movement. There was just the house, the open gate, the strange smell, and the crushing silence. It was a puzzle, and we were standing right in the middle of it. Our caution was at war with our curiosity. We ended up at the front of the house, standing on the gravel driveway. The front door was closed. We stood there for what felt like a very long time, just staring at it. The debate began in hushed whispers. Liam was the most hesitant. He pointed out that we were trespassing. If someone was home, we could be in serious trouble. He argued that we had seen enough. We had satisfied our curiosity, and the smart thing to do now was to turn around and walk away. He reminded us that the situation felt off, and our instincts were telling us to be careful. Going inside was crossing a line we might not be able to uncross. Cole was on the other side of the argument. His curiosity was getting the better of him. He argued that the open gate was an invitation. More than that, he felt we might have a responsibility to check things out. What if something had happened? What if someone inside needed help? The silence and the strange smell could be signs of a medical emergency. He said we couldn't just leave without making sure everything was okay. To him, the risk of not going in was greater than the risk of trespassing. He made a good point. The thought that someone could be hurt and we just walked away was a heavy one. I was caught in the middle. I understood both points of view completely. Part of me, the cautious part, agreed with Liam. This was not our business. The place gave me a bad feeling, and pushing our luck seemed foolish. But the other part of me, the explorer part, was with Cole. The mystery of this place was overwhelming. The open gate, the warm ashes we could now see in the fireplace through a window, the unfinished meal on the table. It was all too strange to ignore. We were skilled outdoorsmen, not detectives, but the puzzle was laid out right in front of us. It felt wrong to just turn our backs on it. Our nervousness was obvious. We kept looking over our shoulders, back towards the woods. It felt like we were being watched. Every whisper seemed to echo in the still air. We argued back and forth, our voices low and tense. Liam stressed the legal risk. Cole stressed the moral duty. I weighed the evidence. In the end, Cole's argument won out. The combination of clues was too compelling. It didn't feel like a simple case of an abandoned house. It felt like a life had been interrupted. We made a decision. We would knock first. If there was no answer, we would carefully and respectfully enter the house just to make sure no one was in distress. With our decision made, a new kind of tension settled over us. Liam still looked uneasy, but he nodded in agreement. We were in this together. I was the one who walked up the 3 wooden steps to the front porch. The wood didn't even creak. My heart was pounding in my chest. I raised my hand and knocked on the heavy wooden door. The sound was loud and hollow. It seemed to break the silence for a moment, but then the quiet rushed back in, even deeper than before. We waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. There was no response, no voice, no footsteps, nothing. I knocked again, this time louder. "Hello? Is anyone home?" We saw the gate was open. "We just want to make sure everything is okay." My voice sounded small and weak in the vast silence. It was absorbed by the house and the woods, leaving no echo. We listened intently, straining to hear any sign of life from within. There was only the sound of our own breathing. The house remained perfectly still, a silent witness to our intrusion. It was clear that no one was going to answer the door. The time had come to follow through on our plan. I reached for the doorknob. It was cold, old brass. I hesitated for a final second, looking back at Liam and Cole. They both gave me a nod. I turned the knob slowly. It wasn't locked. The latch clicked softly, and the door swung inward with a gentle push. It opened into a small entryway. The strange, sweet, metallic smell was stronger in here. It wasn't overpowering, but it was definitely present. The air inside the house was still and cool, but not as cold as the air outside. It felt protected, sealed off from the world. We stood on the threshold, peering into the dim light of the house. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. Liam and Cole followed right behind me, closing the door softly. We didn't want to disturb anything. We moved with the same caution we used in the woods, placing our feet carefully on the wooden floor. Our eyes slowly adjusted to the lower light. We found ourselves in a small, tidy living room. A sofa and 2 armchairs were arranged neatly around a stone fireplace. A bookshelf filled with books stood against one wall. A woven rug covered the floor. It was a cozy, normal room, but its normality, combined with the silence and the smell, made it feel incredibly strange. The living room was immaculate. There wasn't a speck of dust on the coffee table. The cushions on the sofa were plumped and perfectly arranged. It looked like a room that had been cleaned and tidied only moments ago. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no chaos. It was the opposite of what you might expect if something bad had happened. It was a room waiting for its owner to return. This level of neatness was another piece of the puzzle that just didn't fit. People who leave their homes in a hurry don't usually stop to straighten the cushions. We moved quietly from the living room into the next area, which was an open-plan kitchen and dining space. The tidiness continued here. The countertops were wiped clean. The dishes in the drying rack were stacked neatly. A calendar on the wall was turned to the correct month, October 2026. The date, Monday the 12th, was circled. Today's date. This sent a shiver down my spine. Whatever happened here, it happened very, very recently. It wasn't a historical mystery, this was fresh. The person who lived here was expecting this day to be important for some reason. We looked around the kitchen, taking in every detail. A set of keys hung on a hook by the back door. A wallet sat on the counter right next to the keys. We didn't touch it, but we could see the corner of a driver's license sticking out. A jacket was draped over the back of a chair. These were the things a person takes with them when they leave the house. Keys, wallet, jacket. But they were all still here. It was as if the owner had simply vanished into thin air, right from the middle of their home. The house felt less like a home and more like a museum exhibit titled "The Last Normal Moment." The feeling of being an intruder was very strong. We were walking through someone's private life, uninvited. Every object told a story, but we couldn't read the language. We were surrounded by clues, but we couldn't understand what they meant. The house was frozen in time, stuck in a moment just before its owner disappeared. It was a perfect, peaceful scene, but the absence of the person who created it made it feel deeply wrong. We were walking through a ghost story, but the ghost wasn't a spirit, it was the person who was missing. Our attention was drawn back to the living room by the fireplace. From the outside, we had noticed there was no smoke coming from the chimney. But, as we stood in the room, we could feel a faint warmth radiating from the hearth. It was a very subtle heat, the kind you feel when a fire has recently died down. Cole, always the most practical of us, knelt down in front of the stone fireplace. He slowly reached his hand out, holding it just above the pile of ash and charred logs in the grate. He didn't need to touch it to know. He looked up at us, his eyes wide. "It's still warm," he whispered. The words hung in the silent room. A fire had been burning in this fireplace not too long ago, maybe just a few hours ago. It was proof of life. Someone was here this morning, enjoying the warmth of a fire on a cold October day. They had built the fire, tended to it, and then... What? Where did they go? A person doesn't just get up and leave a warm fire to go for a walk in the woods without their keys or wallet. The warmth was a living clue in a dead, silent house. This discovery changed everything. The mystery was no longer abstract. It had a timeline. The person disappeared this morning, today. We were not just hours behind them, we might have been minutes behind them. The thought was chilling. We could have passed them on the trail without even knowing it. Or maybe they were still close by. We all glanced instinctively towards the windows, half expecting to see a face looking back at us. The woods outside seemed darker and more menacing than before. The house no longer felt empty. It felt recently vacated. The warm ashes raised more questions than they answered. Why would someone leave a fire? In an emergency like a fire or a medical crisis, you would expect signs of panic, but the house was perfectly neat. If they left willingly, why abandon a warm hearth on a cold day and leave all their essential items behind? It made no sense. We were standing in a room that was a complete contradiction. It was both cozy and terrifying. It was normal and impossibly strange. The warm ashes were like the last, fading heartbeat of the house, a final sign of the life that had been here just a short while ago. The final and perhaps most disturbing clue was on the dining table. A single place had been set for a meal. A plate, a fork, a knife, and a glass were arranged neatly on a placemat. On the plate was a half-eaten breakfast: scrambled eggs, a piece of toast with a bite taken out of it, and 2 sausages. A cup of coffee sat next to the plate, steam still faintly rising from the dark liquid. It was a scene of perfect domesticity interrupted. Someone had been sitting right here, in this chair, eating their breakfast this morning. We stared at the unfinished meal. It was the most powerful clue yet. No one willingly walks away from a hot meal. This was not a planned departure. This was a sudden interruption. Something happened that made the owner of this house get up from this table and leave everything behind. What could be so important, so urgent, that you would leave your food half-eaten and your coffee to go cold? We looked at the chair, pulled out from the table as if someone had just stood up. We could almost see the person sitting there, enjoying a quiet breakfast before their world was turned upside down. The food on the plate was still fresh. The eggs had not dried out, the toast was not hard, and the coffee, as we had seen, was still warm enough to produce steam. This confirmed what the fireplace told us. The disappearance had happened very recently. We were not just in the right place, we were here at the right time. The trail was as hot as it could possibly be, but there was no trail to follow. There were no footprints leading away from the house, no signs of a struggle, no broken door or window. It was as if the person had been lifted right out of their chair by an invisible force. This unfinished meal was the heart of the mystery. It spoke of a normal life brought to a sudden, inexplicable halt. It was a silent testament to the person who was gone. They were not a ghost or a legend. They were a real person who ate scrambled eggs and drank coffee. The scene was so intimate and so personal that it felt like a profound violation to be looking at it. We were strangers staring at the last known moments of someone's life. The questions swirled in our minds. What did they see? What did they hear? What made them stand up from this table and never return? We didn't stay in the house much longer. We had seen enough. The place felt heavy with unanswered questions. We carefully backed out of the house, closing the front door gently behind us. We didn't want to disturb the scene any more than we already had. The clues, the open gate, the warm ashes, the unfinished meal were not for us to solve. This was a matter for the authorities. We made our way back down the long path, the 2-hour trek, feeling much faster on the way out. We didn't talk much. We were each lost in our own thoughts, trying to make sense of what we had seen. When we finally reached civilization and got a phone signal, we did the right thing. We called the police. We told them everything we had found, from the open gate to the half-eaten breakfast. They took our report seriously. A search was launched for the owner of Hargrave House, a man named Alistair Hargrave, the last descendant of the family. They searched the house, the property, and the vast woods that surrounded it. They used dogs, helicopters, and teams of volunteers. They searched for weeks. They found nothing. Not a single footprint, not a shred of clothing, not a single clue to explain where he had gone. The mystery of what happened at Hargrave House on that cold October morning was never solved. Alistair Hargrave was never seen or heard from again. He simply vanished. There were many theories, of course. Some said he had a secret and decided to run away and start a new life. But why leave his wallet and keys? Others whispered that he must have met with foul play, a victim of an unknown enemy. But there was no evidence of violence. The house was left exactly as we found it, a perfect silent tomb. The official report listed him as a missing person, the case eventually growing cold. Even now, years later, I think about that day. I can still see the neat room, feel the faint warmth from the fireplace, and picture the lonely meal on the table. Drummond, Liam and I went looking for an adventure, a chance to explore a local legend, but we found something else entirely. We stumbled into a real-life mystery, a story without an ending. The image of that house, frozen in a single ordinary moment, is burned into my memory. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most frightening thing in the world is a question that has no answer. The Hargrave house stands empty, keeping its secrets.